Welcome to Boring History Relaxation Channel. Tonight we step into a freezing medieval night and discover how a baby survives inside a house built from cold stone, damp timber, smoky air, and the sort of optimism usually reserved for people who think one blanket is enough in January. You stand outside beneath a black winter sky. Frost grips the ground. Your breath hangs pale in the air. Somewhere beyond the wall, a baby stirs in a wooden cradle while the wind presses against the shutters like an unpaid tax collector. You probably would not survive this night, mostly because you're already wondering where the thermostat is. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, post your location and your local time. It is always pleasant to imagine people listening from warm beds while you are about to enter a building where central heating means standing closer to the fire. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open a heavy wooden door and step inside. The room is dim, crowded, and colder than you expect. Stone walls surround you, but they do not create warmth. They absorb it. During the day, the walls remain chilly. At night, they seem to breathe the cold back into the room. Their mass slows changes in temperature, which can help during mild weather, but during a long winter freeze they become enormous slabs of stored discomfort. The first thing you notice is the air. It smells of smoke, wool, ash, damp straw, old wood, and people who have accepted that bathing is more of a seasonal ambition. The fire burns low near the centre of the room or against a wall, depending on the house. Smoke rises slowly toward a roof opening or chimney, though much of it seems to prefer your lungs. Medieval homes often lack the efficient fireplaces you know today. In many dwellings, the hearth is open and the warmth spreads unevenly. Near the fire, your hands begin to thaw. 3 steps away, your feet remain cold. 10 steps away, winter has opened a branch office. A baby cannot regulate body temperature as effectively as an adult. The infant loses warmth quickly through the head, skin, and breath. Medieval parents do not know the modern science of heat loss, but they know what cold feels like, and they know what happens when a child becomes too quiet, too pale, or too weak to feed. Their knowledge comes from observation, repetition, family memory, and grim experience. The baby is not placed alone in the coldest corner. Instead, the cradle sits near the busiest and warmest part of the room. It is close enough to benefit from the hearth, but not so close that sparks land on the bedding. This balance matters. Fire gives life, but it also gives smoke, burns, and the occasional household disaster. The medieval home has no smoke alarm, unless you count the grandmother shouting. The room itself is smaller than the grand stone halls you may picture. Most ordinary families do not live in vast castles. Many inhabit compact houses where people cook, work, eat, and sleep in the same space. This crowding is uncomfortable by modern standards, but it helps preserve warmth. Every body releases heat. Adults, children, and sometimes animals contribute to the small climate of the room. Doors are kept shut whenever possible. Windows are narrow and often covered with wooden shutters, cloth, parchment, or animal skin. Glass exists in medieval Europe, but it is expensive and uncommon in ordinary homes. Tiny openings reduce drafts. Though the room becomes darker, darkness is easier to tolerate than a wind blowing directly across a newborn. You move closer to the cradle. It is simple, perhaps made from oak, ash, or another local wood. The baby lies wrapped tightly in layers of linen and wool. The wrapping is not merely decorative. Swaddling reduces exposed skin and keeps the infant compact. Warmth becomes easier to conserve when arms and legs are held close to the body. A cap covers the baby's head. This is one of the most important small defences against cold. Medieval people regularly cover their heads indoors, not because everyone is preparing for a dramatic portrait, but because it is practical. A sleeping cap, hood, kerchief, or bonnet keeps warmth from escaping and protects against drafts. The floor beneath you may be packed earth, timber, or stone. Rushes or straw cover parts of it. These materials provide modest insulation and absorb spills, mud, and household dirt. A quirky detail is that aromatic herbs may sometimes be scattered among floor rushes to improve the smell or discourage insects. Rosemary, lavender, mint, or sweet flag can turn a cold room into something slightly less like a damp sack. The cradle is raised above the floor. This matters because the coldest air settles low and dampness gathers near the ground. A suspended or elevated cradle protects the baby from both chill and wandering animals. Chickens are useful, but they are not trained childcare professionals. You notice cloth hanging near the sleeping area. Curtains, bed hangings, or simple fabric screens create smaller pockets of still air. Even a rough wool curtain reduces drafts. Medieval households understand this without using words like insulation or thermal efficiency. They simply know that fabric between the baby and the wind means fewer restless cries. The family prepares for night long before darkness fully arrives. Firewood is brought indoors. Embers are protected. Bedding is checked for dampness. Wet clothes are moved away from the cradle. A pot of water or broth warms near the hearth. These routines are ordinary, but they form the difference between discomfort and danger. A mainstream historical fact is that infant mortality is high throughout medieval Europe. Disease, premature birth, poor nutrition, accidents, and infection claim many young lives. Cold alone is rarely the only cause, but it weakens babies and makes other illnesses more dangerous. Survival depends on many small actions repeated every day. Historians still argue whether medieval parents expected infant death so often that they avoided deep emotional attachment. Older interpretations sometimes describe families as distant or resigned. More recent scholarship points to prayers, letters, memorials, burial practices, and careful household routines that suggest intense concern and affection. The parent leaning over this cradle does not treat the baby as replaceable. The worry in the room feels immediate and familiar. You watch the mother touch the infant's cheek, then slide a finger beneath the wool wrapping to feel the chest. She checks warmth by touch. She listens to breathing. She adjusts the cap. Nothing about the gesture is careless. It is quiet, practiced, and attentive. Outside, the wind sharpens. Snow begins tapping against the shutter. Inside, the family draws closer to the hearth. The stone walls remain cold, but survival does not depend on making the entire house comfortable. It depends on creating one warm zone, one protected cradle, one circle of bodies and fabric around a fragile child. The baby stirs, makes a small sound, and settles again. The fire cracks softly. Someone adds another piece of wood. Someone else closes a gap beneath the door with rolled cloth. The house is freezing, but the baby is not abandoned to the cold. Warmth is gathered carefully, guarded closely, and shared. You lean closer to the cradle and notice how little of the baby you can actually see. A round cheek, the edge of a tiny nose, and one suspiciously determined fist are all that escape the wrapping. The rest of the child is folded into layers so neatly that the result resembles a warm loaf with opinions. The cradle itself is narrow. It is not designed for sprawling. Medieval infants often sleep in compact wooden cradles, baskets, or padded boxes that can be moved close to a working parent. Some cradles rock on curved runners. Others hang from ropes or rest on simple frames. A hanging cradle can be nudged with one hand while someone spins thread, prepares food, or stares into the middle distance while wondering why the baby has rejected sleep for the fourth time. You place your hand against the wood. It is cool, but not icy. Before putting the infant down, the family may warm the bedding near the hearth, or with a heated stone wrapped in cloth. The stone must not be too hot, and it must never touch the baby directly. Medieval households do not own thermometers, so the safest instrument is a cautious palm and a healthy fear of making a terrible mistake. The mattress is simple. It may be filled with wool, straw, feathers, chaff, dried grass, or soft plant material. Wealth affects the quality, but not the basic purpose. The filling lifts the child away from the hard boards and traps pockets of air. Wool is especially valuable because it stays insulating even when slightly damp. Straw is cheaper and easier to replace, though it must be changed regularly to avoid insect and unpleasant smells. A small linen cloth lies beneath the baby. It can absorb moisture and be removed without replacing every layer. This matters because a wet infant becomes cold very quickly. Families may not understand evaporation in scientific terms, but they understand that damp cloth chills skin. Keeping the child dry is nearly as important as keeping the child covered. You watch as the mother unwraps the baby for changing. The speed is impressive. She does not expose the entire body at once. One section is opened, cleaned, and covered before another is disturbed. Warm cloths may be used when available, though sometimes the task depends on whatever water is close at hand. The room is not warm enough for leisurely childcare. This is not the moment for the baby to enjoy a refreshing breeze. The wrapping begins again. A soft linen layer touches the skin. Over it comes a warmer woolen layer. The arms are placed close to the sides, gokunda, and the legs are gently arranged. Long strips of cloth hold everything in position. Swaddling is common across many medieval communities, although practices differ by region, family, and social class. A mainstream historical fact is that swaddling has been used for centuries to calm infants, limit sudden movements, and make them easier to carry. In a cold household, it also reduces exposed surface area. The baby cannot kick off the coverings as easily, which is useful because infants have a remarkable talent for rejecting the exact blanket keeping them alive. The wrapping is snug, but it should not stop breathing or circulation. Medieval caregivers learned through experience how tightly to bind the cloth. Some medical writers advise restraint and criticize excessive pressure. Others praise firm swaddling because they believe it helps shape the body and keep limbs straight. Historians still argue whether most babies are swaddled as rigidly as later paintings and written complaints suggest. Artwork tends to show idealized arrangements, while moralists often exaggerate bad habits. Daily practice probably ranges from careful wrapping to hurried improvisation, depending on the household, the season, and how many other children are demanding attention. A narrow band supports the baby's head, and a cap is tied beneath the chin. The cap may be linen indoors and wool in harsher cold. Some families add a small hood over it. The ears are covered, the neck is protected. Only the face remains open so breathing stays clear. The baby is then placed on its back or side, depending on local habit and advice. Medieval caregivers do not have modern sleep safety guidelines. They rely on custom, observation, and inherited instruction. Some cradle boards include straps to prevent the child from rolling or falling out. These straps look alarming to you, but a moving cradle near a fire, a table, or a wandering dog creates its own risks. One quirky tidbit is that certain cradles may include charms, beads, coral branches, animal teeth, or small religious objects tied above the infant. Families believe these items can protect against illness, bad luck, nightmares, or the evil eye. Coral is especially valued in parts of Europe and appears in portraits of wealthy children. It is bright, rare, and apparently capable of defeating invisible danger, which is a very impressive resume for a small red branch. The cradle is not always left in one place. During the day, it travels with the rhythm of work. It may sit beside the hearth while bread is prepared, near a loom while cloth is woven, or against a wall where an older sibling can watch it. The infant remains close to human voices, footsteps, and constant movement. This closeness helps with feeding and temperature checks. A caregiver can touch the baby's neck, feel the hands, and notice changes in breathing. Cold hands do not always mean the body is dangerously chilled, but a cool chest, a weak cry, causes concern. The child is lifted, held against an adult, and wrapped again. Human contact becomes a portable source of warmth. The baby rests against a mother's breast beneath a cloak, or inside the fold of a heavy garment. Skin and body heat warm the infant gradually. This is especially useful during feeding, when the wrapping must loosen slightly. You notice that the cradle is shaped to retain heat without sealing the baby inside. High wooden sides block drafts. A light cloth may hang nearby, but it does not cover the face. Breath must move freely. Smoke already challenges the lungs enough without adding a miniature tent. The bedding is checked throughout the evening. A hand slips beneath the blanket. A damp cloth is removed, straw is fluffed, wool is shaken and repositioned. These are small acts, almost invisible beside the drama of winter, yet survival often depends on such ordinary repetition. The family also watches for overheating. This may seem unlikely in a cold stone room, but an infant wrapped too heavily and placed close to the fire can become dangerously hot. Caregivers learn to read flush skin, sweating, restlessness, and rapid breathing. The goal is not maximum heat. It is steady warmth. You hear the cradle creak as it rocks. The sound is soft and regular. The baby's eyelids lower, tiny fingers relax beneath the linen. The layers hold warmth close. The raised cradle keeps away the coldest air, and the steady motion settles the child. There is no single brilliant invention here. There is wood, cloth, wool, straw, touch, and attention. Each material does a modest job. Together, they create a protected little world only a few inches wide. Outside, the frost thickens along the shutters. Inside, the cradle rocks once more, and the small wrapped figure remains warm enough to sleep. The fire never truly rests. You notice that someone is always watching it, even when nobody seems to be looking. A grandmother pauses while spinning wool. A father glances over as he repairs a wooden tool. An older child pokes a glowing log back into place with surprising confidence. The fire is less like a piece of furniture and more like another member of the household. It demands feeding, attention, and occasional negotiation. You kneel beside the hearth and immediately understand why everyone gathers here. Your face feels pleasantly warm. Your back still feels as though winter has filed a formal complaint. Heat reaches only so far before it disappears into the cold room. The hearth sits at the centre of daily life. Food cooks here, water warms here, wet clothes dry here. Stories are shared here. During winter evenings, nearly every important activity happens within reach of the flames. Moving away from the fire means surrendering precious warmth to stone walls and cold air. A mainstream historical fact is that fireplaces became increasingly sophisticated during the Middle Ages. Earlier homes often relied on open hearths where smoke drifted upward through the roof. By the later medieval period, chimneys became more common in many parts of Europe, especially in wealthier homes. Chimneys improved indoor air quality and allowed fireplaces to be built against walls rather than in the middle of the room. Although many ordinary families continued using simpler arrangements for generations, even with a chimney, smoke remains a constant companion. It curls across the ceiling in lazy grey ribbons. It slips into your eyes until they sting. Your clothes absorb its smell within minutes. The baby breathes the same smoky air as everyone else. Modern doctors would immediately point out the risks of indoor smoke exposure, but medieval families have little choice. Without fire, there is no warmth, cooked food, or hot water. Smoke is unpleasant. Freezing is worse. Someone places another split log onto glowing embers instead of throwing it directly into tall flames. They want the fire to burn steadily through the evening rather than flare brightly for a few exciting minutes before collapsing into disappointment. Firewood is valuable. You step outside for a moment and notice neat stacks protected beneath simple shelters. Gathering enough wood before winter is one of the year's most important tasks. Families spend weeks collecting fallen branches, cutting timber where permitted, drying wood, and storing it carefully. Wet wood smokes heavily and burns poorly. Dry wood gives better heat and lasts longer. You suddenly realise that every cheerful crackle in the fireplace represents hours of labour carried out months earlier. The household treats embers almost like treasure. Instead of allowing the fire to die completely overnight, glowing coals are buried beneath ash. The ash acts like an insulating blanket, slowing the loss of heat. In the morning, someone uncovers the hidden embers, adds dry kindling, and gently coaxes the fire back to life. Starting a completely new fire every winter morning would waste time, effort, and valuable fuel. A small iron poker rests beside the hearth. So does a pair of tongs blackened by years of use. Iron tools are expensive enough that they receive careful treatment. Every object has several jobs. The poker rearranges burning logs. The tongs move hot pots. Occasionally they rescue a potato that has made an ambitious attempt to escape dinner. The baby remains nearby, though never directly beside open flames. A careful distance protects the infant from sparks while allowing warmth to spread through blankets and clothing. Adults instinctively position themselves between the cradle and drafts whenever possible. Their own bodies interrupt moving air before it reaches the child. One person hangs damp cloth near the fire, but not close enough to scorch. Steam rises gently. The room becomes slightly less dry. Leather boots, wool cloaks, and mittens also wait their turn near the warmth. Nothing dries quickly during a cold medieval winter, yet every little improvement matters. You notice cooking pots suspended above the flames. Thick soups simmer slowly for hours. Oats soften into porridge. Beans become edible only after patient cooking. The fire serves dinner while also heating the room. Efficiency is not a fashionable concept here. It is simply survival. One quirky detail catches your attention. Some households place heated stones or bricks near the fire before wrapping them in cloth and carrying them to beds or work areas. These warmed objects release gentle heat long after leaving the hearth. They must be handled carefully because overheating can damage bedding or cause burns, but when used wisely they offer a welcome pocket of comfort during bitter nights. The family knows exactly which stones can survive repeated heating without cracking. Nobody wants a rock to explode dramatically beside the soup. That would certainly make dinner memorable, but not in the recommended way. Outside, the wind grows louder. You hear it whistle through tiny gaps around the shutters. The roof creaks softly. Snowflakes strike the walls with quiet persistence. The stone house resists the weather, yet it never completely defeats it. Cold air always searches for another opening. Small defences appear everywhere. Rolled cloth blocks the bottom of doors. Animal hides cover troublesome cracks. Thick woven hangings reduce drafts from particularly chilly walls. These measures do not transform the room into luxury, but they slow the steady invasion of winter. Historians still argue whether medieval interiors were consistently as freezing as modern imagination suggests. Experimental archaeology has shown that occupied houses with active hearths, cooking fires, fabric hangings, and several people inside can become noticeably warmer than empty reconstructed buildings. Even so, temperatures probably remain far below what most people today would consider comfortable, especially during severe winters. The flames dance across rough stone, casting shadows that stretch and shrink with every movement. The baby opens sleepy eyes for a moment, watching flickering light without understanding why adults seem endlessly fascinated by burning wood. Truthfully, you understand completely. This fire means breakfast tomorrow. It means dry clothing. It means warm milk. It means a chance for a newborn to make it through another cold night. As darkness deepens, the family naturally gathers even closer together. Conversation becomes quieter. Someone hums a simple tune while mending clothing. Another person carefully adds one final log before settling onto a bench. The room is still cold enough that you can see faint breaths near the doorway. Yet around the hearth there exists a small island of warmth built from patience, preparation, and constant attention. The flames rise, settle, and glow. Nobody celebrates them because they are ordinary. Nobody ignores them because they are essential. Every gentle crackle carries the comforting promise that, for one more winter night, the cold remains outside just a little longer. As evening settles into true night, the room grows quieter, but nobody hurries toward an empty bed. sleeping as a group activity. To modernise, this feels unusual. You may picture everyone enjoying a private bedroom with thick blankets and a comfortable mattress. Instead, you find a household where warmth is too valuable to spread thinly across several rooms. The family naturally gathers into the warmest sleeping space available. You step toward the largest bed in the house. It is taller than expected, raised on a wooden frame with ropes or sturdy slats supporting a mattress stuffed with straw, feathers, or wool. Climbing into it requires a small step rather than an athletic leap. Although after walking through medieval mud all day, even that tiny climb feels like a personal achievement. The mattress is surprisingly thick in wealthier homes, while humbler families make do with simpler fillings that must be shaken and replaced regularly. Fresh straw has a pleasant grassy scent. Old straw has a personality that nobody appreciates. Several blankets lie folded at the foot of the bed. The first layer may be coarse linen. Above it rests thick wool, heavy enough to trap precious body heat. Animal furs sometimes provide another layer, especially where winters are severe. Sheep, deer, rabbit, and other locally available skins all have practical value. You slip beneath the blankets for a moment. Immediately you notice something important. The bed itself is not warm. It only becomes warm because people are inside it. Every sleeping body releases heat throughout the night. One adult produces a steady supply of warmth. 2 adults create an even more comfortable space. Add children sleeping nearby, and the enclosed area beneath heavy blankets develops its own small climate. A mainstream historical fact is that bed sharing is extremely common throughout medieval Europe. Families often sleep together because houses contain limited space, and heating is expensive. Separate bedrooms are a luxury unavailable to most people. Sharing beds conserves warmth while making the best use of valuable bedding. You hear quiet conversation as everyone settles into familiar positions. A child complains that someone has taken too much blanket. Another insists complete innocence despite clear evidence to the contrary. Some family traditions remain wonderfully timeless. The baby is not automatically placed into the large bed with sleeping adults. Parents understand, even without modern medical research, that tiny infants require careful attention during the night. Many households keep a cradle, basket, or small sleeping space close beside the bed. This arrangement allows easy feeding and frequent checking while reducing certain risks associated with crowded sleeping. Practices vary enormously from one region to another and from one family to the next. Necessity often shapes decisions more than written advice. The bed itself becomes almost a room within a room. If the household owns curtains, they hang from a wooden frame surrounding the bed. Thick fabric encloses the sleeping area on several sides. During the day, the curtains remain open. At night, they are drawn closed. The effect surprises you. Inside the curtains, the air feels calmer. Drafts weaken. Warmth lingers longer. The heavy cloth traps heat released by sleeping bodies and blocks moving air from cold walls and windows. Even simple households without elaborate bed curtains sometimes hang blankets or woven cloth nearby for exactly the same reason. You glance upward. The ceiling disappears into darkness where smoke from the hearth slowly collects. Lower down, the air is clearer, though faint traces of wood smoke still drift through the room. Bedding absorbs these familiar scents until every blanket carries memories of countless fires. One elderly woman quietly slips a warmed brick wrapped in cloth beneath the foot of the bed before climbing in. Nobody reacts because this is perfectly ordinary. Cold feet are apparently just as unpopular 800 years ago as they are today. The baby begins to fuss. Without fully waking, the mother reaches into the cradle and rests a gentle hand against the infant's chest. The crying fades almost immediately. Sometimes reassurance arrives through touch alone. The family does not expect uninterrupted sleep. Babies wake frequently to feed. Adults also wake naturally during long winter nights. Medieval sleep patterns often include periods of wakefulness between stretches of rest. During these quiet hours, someone may stir the fire, check animals, pray softly, or simply lie listening to the wind outside. Historians still argue whether this divided pattern of sleep is nearly universal during the Middle Ages or whether it varies greatly depending on season, occupation, and location. Written descriptions suggest many people recognize separate periods of sleeping and waking, especially during the long nights of winter. The arrangement works surprisingly well for infant care. When adults wake naturally, they often glance toward the cradle, adjust a blanket, or feed the baby before returning to sleep. The child rarely remains unattended for many hours. A faint whistle slips through the shutters. Instantly, someone notices her old piece of wool is pressed against the gap where cold air enters. It is a tiny repair, almost invisible. Yet the difference becomes noticeable within minutes. Medieval families become experts at finding invisible streams of cold that sneak into the house. You realize how carefully they observe their surroundings. Nobody owns a thermometer. Nobody measures humidity. Nobody consults weather forecasts. Instead, people judge conditions by feeling the air against their cheeks, watching smoke drift through the room, listening to changing winds, and noticing how quickly water freezes in buckets. One quirky custom appears as everyone prepares for sleep. Some people believe certain herbs tucked into bedding encourage peaceful dreams or discourage troublesome spirits. Lavender, mugwort, chamomile, and other fragrant plants sometimes find their way beneath pillows or into mattress stuffing. Whether these herbs possess magical qualities remains open to imagination, but they certainly make bedding smell considerably nicer than old straw. Outside, frost thickens across the landscape. Inside, breathing settles into a slow rhythm. The baby sleeps in a cradle close enough for every small sound to reach listening ears. Heavy blankets rise and fall with steady breaths. Curtains soften the drafts. Bodies share warmth without anyone discussing the science behind it. The room is still cold. No amount of wool completely defeats a medieval winter, yet every sleeping arrangement reflects careful choices learned through generations of experience. The position of the cradle, the height of the bed, the layers of fabric, the closing of curtains, the placement near the hearth. None of these decisions happen by accident. Each one quietly improves the chances that when dawn finally arrives, every member of the household, especially its smallest one, wakes to greet another winter day. Morning has not arrived, but someone quietly feeds another piece of wood into the hearth, and the soft glow reaches a pile of neatly folded clothing waiting beside the fire. Tiny clothing. Every piece is surprisingly practical. There are no bright plastic buttons, no cartoon animals smiling from the sleeves, and certainly no tiny shoes designed more for photographs than walking. Everything has one purpose: keep a very small human warm enough to grow. You pick up the first garment. It is made from linen. Linen comes from the flax plant, and it feels smoother against delicate skin than coarse wool. Medieval families understand through experience that rough fabric rubbing directly against an infant can cause irritation. Linen becomes the first layer because it is comfortable, breathable, and easier to wash than heavier materials. Over the linen comes wool. You immediately notice the difference. The wool is thick, springy, and surprisingly heavy for such a tiny garment. Sheep provide one of medieval Europe's greatest natural resources. Wool appears everywhere. It becomes cloaks, blankets, stockings, hats, gloves, and infant clothing. Entire local economies depend upon raising sheep and producing textiles. A mainstream historical fact is that wool is the dominant textile across much of medieval Europe. It provides excellent insulation, remains warm even when slightly damp, and can be woven into fabrics ranging from coarse everyday cloth to fine luxury garments. The baby's little tunic is plain. No elaborate embroidery decorates it. Fancy stitching belongs to wealthy households and ceremonial clothing. Ordinary babies wear garments built for repeated use, frequent washing, and easy repairs. You notice patches sewn onto one sleeve. Nothing goes to waste. When clothing becomes too worn for adults, usable sections are cut away and transformed into garments for children. Eventually, those same pieces become cleaning cloths, bandages, or stuffing for cushions. Fabric enjoys several different careers before retirement. The family dresses the baby carefully. The linen shirt goes on first. A soft woolen gown follows. Then another light wrap surrounds the body before swaddling cloth holds everything neatly in place. The goal is not endless layers. Too many coverings can restrict movement and trap excessive heat near the fire. Instead, each layer serves a specific purpose while leaving enough room for comfortable breathing. The baby's hands disappear beneath warm fabric. Tiny fingers seem determined to escape anyway. Some ambitions begin very early in life. Attention then turns toward the head. A small linen cap fits snugly over fine hair. During especially cold weather, another wool cap may cover the first one. Medieval people frequently cover their heads indoors during winter because they recognize how quickly cold drafts affect exposed skin. The baby's ears disappear beneath soft cloth. Only bright little eyes and a pink nose remain visible. The nose, however, appears deeply unconcerned with historical accuracy and immediately starts running. One older woman laughs quietly before wiping it with practiced speed. Clothing changes throughout the day. If the baby becomes damp after feeding, drools excessively, or soils the linen underneath, garments are replaced as quickly as circumstances allow. Dry fabric is precious. A cold, wet shirt against infant skin steals warmth surprisingly fast. Even without modern scientific language, families understand this lesson through repeated experience. You notice several garments hanging near, but not directly beside. The fire. The careful distance matters. Too close, and sparks may burn holes into valuable cloth. Too far away, and damp fabric never fully dries. Every household learns exactly where warmth is strongest without becoming dangerous. The room smells pleasantly of clean wool warming near glowing embers. Is one of the more comforting scents you have encountered since entering this stone house. You examine the stitching. Every seam is made by hand. Tiny. Even stitches hold each garment together with remarkable care. Making clothing requires countless hours of spinning thread, weaving fabric, cutting patterns, sewing pieces together, and repairing damage as it appears. A single baby outfit represents weeks of patient work. Suddenly, that tiny shirt seems much more valuable than you first imagined. One quirky detail catches your attention. In some regions, families believe turning an infant's garment inside out for a short time can confuse mischievous spirits believed to bother young children. Others sew small coloured threads into clothing or attach modest decorative symbols thought to bring good fortune. Whether these customs offer supernatural protection is another question entirely. They certainly provide conversation for historians. The baby's feet receive special attention. Small wool socks or soft cloth wrappings protect tiny toes from the chill rising through the room. Shoes are unnecessary for a child who cannot yet walk, but warm feet matter greatly. Cold extremities worry experienced caregivers because they may signal that the infant needs another blanket or closer contact with an adult. The mother gently touches both feet. Warm enough. She nods with quiet satisfaction. Historians still argue whether medieval clothing was generally heavier than modern people imagine or lighter because of limited resources. Archaeological textile fragments, artwork, and written records suggest enormous regional variation. Northern communities facing harsher winters naturally emphasize thicker wool and layered garments, while milder climates allow lighter clothing for much of the year. The family's skill lies in constant adjustment. If the fire burns brightly, one outer layer comes off. If someone opens the door to bring in wood, another blanket quickly appears. If the baby falls asleep against a parent's chest, wraps loosen slightly so the child remains comfortable without overheating. There is no fixed formula. There is only careful observation. You begin noticing how often someone checks the infant without making a great performance of it. A hand brushes across the forehead. Another finger touches the neck. The cap is straightened. The blanket is tucked again. These gestures take only seconds, yet they happen dozens of times throughout the day. Nobody announces them. They simply become part of ordinary life. Near the wall hangs a larger cloak belonging to the mother. Its thick wool folds easily around both adult and child during trips outdoors or brief journeys between buildings. The baby disappears almost completely beneath the protective fabric while remaining close enough to benefit from shared body warmth. The cloak functions like a portable shelter. Simple, effective, essential. Outside, the frozen wind continues sweeping across fields and narrow paths. Inside, carefully chosen fabrics create another layer of defense between fragile skin and relentless winter. Linen keeps the body comfortable. Wool traps precious warmth. Caps shield tiny ears. Dry clothing replaces damp. Every thread carries the quiet effort of spinning wheels, patient hands, and generations of practical knowledge. The baby yawns, stretches against the snug wrapping, and settles once more, wrapped in cloth made from fields and flocks. The smallest member of the household wears the accumulated wisdom of countless winters. The baby wakes before anyone has the chance to enjoy a peaceful morning. A tiny sound escapes the cradle. Within seconds it grows into a determined protest that suggests the end of civilization is very near. In reality, breakfast is simply a few minutes late. The mother smiles with the calm expression of someone who has heard this particular complaint many times before. She lifts the baby from the cradle and wraps a thick cloak around both of them. The extra layer keeps warmth close while they settle beside the hearth. The fire has burned steadily through the night, leaving a bed of glowing coals that quietly warms the room. Feeding begins. For most medieval infants, breast milk is the safest and most reliable source of nourishment. It is warm, immediately available, and naturally suited to a newborn's changing needs. During harsh winters, it offers another advantage. A baby does not need to swallow cold food or drink that has been stored in an unheated room. A mainstream historical fact is that breastfeeding is the normal way to feed infants throughout medieval Europe. Mothers commonly nurse their children for many months, and in many communities breastfeeding continues well into the second year of life. The exact length varies according to local custom, family circumstances, health, and social status. The baby's crying quickly fades. The room becomes almost silent except for the crackling fire and the gentle rhythm of feeding. You notice that the mother's cloak covers both of them like a small tent. It shields the baby from wandering drafts while allowing body heat to gather underneath. Nothing about this arrangement is elaborate, yet it creates a remarkably comfortable little space. Nearby, another pot hangs above the fire. Steam drifts lazily from its rim. Inside, thick oat porridge cooks slowly. Adults eat first because they need strength for the day's work, but nourishing the mother also helps nourish the baby. Good food for her means better milk for the child. Even without modern nutritional science, families understand that a hungry nursing mother cannot easily care for an infant through a long winter. Meals depend greatly on the season. Fresh vegetables are limited. Fruit is scarce. Instead, people rely on stored grains, dried peas, beans, onions, turnips, preserved meat when available, cheese, and bread. Wealthier households enjoy greater variety, but almost everyone depends on food carefully saved from the previous harvest. The success of summer quietly determines the comfort of winter. You watch someone slice a dark loaf of bread. It is dense, hearty, and far heavier than the fluffy loaves found in modern bakeries. A piece dropped onto the floor sounds almost capable of defending the house against invaders. Nobody wastes even a crumb. Food has required months of labour. One elderly man carefully stirs a pot of broth. The rich smell fills the room. The broth itself is not for the baby yet. Very young infants receive milk rather than solid food. However, older babies approaching the end of infancy gradually begin tasting soft foods prepared especially for them. These first foods are simple. Thin porridge, soft bread soaked until almost liquid, mashed vegetables, occasionally a little dairy, depending on local practice. Everything must be easy to swallow. Everything must be warm. Cold meals hold little appeal on a freezing morning. One quirky custom catches your attention. Some families believe that certain herbs, used in very small amounts and according to local tradition, can strengthen nursing mothers or encourage healthy milk production. Fennel is one plant often associated with this belief. Whether every claimed benefit is genuine remains uncertain, but the pleasant aroma certainly improves the kitchen. The baby finishes feeding and falls asleep almost immediately. Apparently breakfast has resolved the crisis after all. The mother gently lifts the child to her shoulder. A tiny burp echoes through the room. The family reacts with complete satisfaction. It is not the most heroic sound in medieval history, but it is reassuring. You begin noticing how often feeding and warmth work together. The baby rarely eats while lying alone. Instead, Feeding almost always happens against another person's body. Shared warmth helps maintain a comfortable temperature while strengthening the bond between caregiver and child. The routine repeats many times each day. Feed, wrap, hold, rest. Wake, feed again. Simple patterns become powerful tools for survival. Water presents another challenge. Fresh water may be perfectly safe in some places and questionable in others. Wells, springs, streams, and rainwater all serve communities with varying degrees of reliability. Water intended for cooking often spends time over the fire, becoming pleasantly hot before it reaches the table. Warm drinks comfort tired adults after hours spent outdoors. Small children old enough for other foods also benefit from meals served warm rather than chilled. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were more nutritious than older historical accounts suggested. Earlier writers often portrayed ordinary people as living on poor quality food with little variety. More recent studies of bones, surviving records, and archaeological evidence indicate that many rural families consumed balanced seasonal diets when harvests were successful. Famine, crop failure, and severe winters remained constant threats. But everyday nutrition was not always as bleak as popular imagination suggests. You notice the family's careful attention during every feeding. The baby is never hurried. If the child pauses, the mother waits. If the infant falls asleep halfway through, she gently encourages another few moments before settling the baby again. Patience seems almost as important as milk. Near the fire sits a small covered container. Inside is animal fat mixed with herbs. A little is sometimes rubbed onto dry skin chapped by cold winter air. Babies have delicate skin that easily becomes irritated beneath layers of wool and linen. Gentle care helps prevent small cracks that could become uncomfortable. Outside, the wind continues blowing across frozen fields where nothing edible grows for many months. Inside, the family depends on food gathered, harvested, dried, salted, smoked, stored, and protected long before winter arrived. Every meal reflects careful planning. Every feeding carries quiet hope. The baby stretches lazily, wrapped once again in warm cloth. A full stomach relaxes tiny muscles. Warm milk, steady body heat, and the gentle glow of the hearth combine into the simplest medicine a winter morning can offer. The snow outside remains indifferent. The cold stone walls remain unmoved. Yet within this small circle of firelight, nourishment becomes another shield against the long season, helping the smallest life in the house greet another day with strength enough to keep growing. The house feels a little warmer than you expect, not because the weather has improved, not because someone has discovered a miraculous new fireplace. It feels warmer because the room is full of people. You begin to notice something that is easy to overlook. Heat does not come only from burning wood. Every person inside this stone house quietly contributes to the warmth around them. One body gives off only a little heat. 6 or 7 bodies gathered together create an entirely different atmosphere. The baby benefits from all of them. The grandmother sits nearest the window where her experienced eyes can mend clothing, even in weak winter light. Her fingers never seem to stop moving. A torn sleeve becomes whole again. A loose blanket edge is stitched back into place. A worn baby cap receives another careful patch. She also keeps one ear tuned toward the cradle. Long experience has taught her the difference between an ordinary sleepy whimper and the cry that demands immediate attention. Across the room, an older sister carefully rocks the cradle with one foot while twisting wool into thread. She has learned this rhythm almost without thinking. Rock, twist, rock again. The baby settles. It is surprisingly effective. Her brother returns through the heavy wooden door carrying another bundle of firewood. Cold air rushes into the room for only a moment before the door closes again. He stamps snow from his boots, shakes frost from his cloak, and immediately places fresh logs near the hearth so they can dry before being burned. Even this simple chore helps the baby. Dry wood means hotter fires and less smoke. The father repairs a wooden stool beside the hearth. He stays close enough to hear the baby but far enough away that flying wood chips never reach the cradle. His work does not stop simply because there is an infant in the house. Medieval families cannot afford that luxury. Instead, work and childcare happen together. One person cooks, another spins wool, Someone repairs tools. Someone watches the baby. Then the roles quietly change throughout the day. There is rarely a single dedicated caregiver. The whole household becomes one. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval families often lived in multi-generational households. Grandparents, unmarried relatives and servants, apprentices, and labourers might all share the same home depending on wealth, occupation, and local customs. Daily life relied heavily on cooperation rather than individual independence. The baby grows up surrounded by voices. Someone is always speaking. Recipes are exchanged. Village news is discussed. A neighbour's stubborn goat receives far more attention than seems entirely necessary. The infant hears laughter, songs, prayers, arguments, and stories almost from birth. Silence is actually rather uncommon. You notice another source of warmth that might surprise modern visitors. In many rural communities, valuable animals spend part of the winter very close to human living spaces. Sometimes they occupy an attached byre. Sometimes they remain in a section of the building separated by wooden partitions. A cow, a few sheep, or a pair of goats generate noticeable body heat. Their presence also protects valuable livestock from harsh weather and thieves. Of course, animals contribute something besides warmth. The smell arrives before they do. You quickly discover that medieval winter air contains generous notes of smoke, damp wool, soup, leather, and livestock. It is an unforgettable combination. Nobody in the house appears bothered. They have far more important concerns than impressing visitors from 8 centuries in the future. The baby occasionally hears soft lowing from a nearby cow, or the gentle shuffling of sheep settling for the night. These sounds become part of ordinary life. One quirky detail appears during the afternoon. An elderly aunt quietly hangs a small carved wooden bird above the cradle. It turns slowly whenever warm air rises from the nearby hearth. She smiles and says it keeps the baby interested while also bringing good fortune to the household. Whether the carving truly influences fortune is impossible to know, but it certainly gives the infant something fascinating to stare at besides grown-ups discussing turnips. The baby's eyes follow the gentle movement with complete concentration. For several peaceful minutes, everyone enjoys the rare miracle of a content infant. You also notice how often people physically hold the baby, not just the parents. The grandmother carries the child while checking bread. An older sibling proudly walks a few careful steps with the infant wrapped securely in blankets. The father lifts the baby after returning from outside so the little one can feel the warmth of his heavy wool cloak before he removes it. Every embrace transfers warmth. Every embrace also builds familiarity. The child grows accustomed to many voices, many hands, and many heartbeats. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood involved more communal caregiving than modern historians once believed. Household records, legal documents, artwork, and surviving letters suggest that childcare often extended well beyond the parents alone, though the exact balance differed greatly according to region, occupation, wealth, and family circumstances. A visitor enters carrying a basket. The neighbour has brought fresh eggs in exchange for a small sack of barley. Trade like this happens constantly. Money is useful, but everyday life often depends just as much on favours, exchanges, and trusted relationships. While the adults discuss the bargain, the visitor naturally leans over the cradle. A quiet smile, a gentle greeting, another quick check that the baby looks healthy. Children belong not only to families but also to communities. If illness strikes, neighbours may bring food, gather firewood, or help with farm work until the household recovers. Winter demands cooperation. Trying to survive alone is rarely a successful strategy. As evening approaches, everyone gradually moves closer to the hearth once more. The circle tightens. Work continues, but hands stay within easy reach of the warmth. The baby sleeps through most of the conversation, wrapped snugly while surrounded by familiar sounds. The room is not luxurious. The walls remain cold. The windows still admit the occasional whisper of icy air. Yet the greatest source of comfort is not hidden inside the fireplace. It comes from people choosing, almost without thinking, to stay close together. The house itself cannot protect the infant from every danger. The family can. Each shared task, each careful glance toward the cradle, each repaired blanket, Each arm that lifts the child for a few warm moments quietly strengthens the baby's chances of surviving another demanding winter day. The fire glows steadily. Voices soften as darkness settles beyond the shutters. The smallest member of the household sleeps at the center of a living circle of warmth created not only by flames, but by many patient hands working together. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you leave the village behind. Ahead, a castle rises from the hillside. Its towers look magnificent. Its walls appear impossibly thick. Its stone shines pale beneath the winter sky. For a brief moment, you assume babies born inside such an impressive fortress must enjoy wonderfully warm lives. Then you step through the great gate. A gust of cold air immediately changes your mind. The entrance hall feels enormous. The ceiling disappears high above your head. Every sound echoes across the stone floor. Servants walk quickly through long passages carrying baskets, buckets, and bundles of firewood. Somewhere a door slams, and the noise bounces through the corridors like a drum. The castle is certainly grand. It is not especially cozy. Large spaces are difficult to heat. A roaring fireplace warms only the area nearest the flames. A few steps away, the air becomes noticeably colder. Stone absorbs heat throughout the day and returns that chill during the night. Thick walls protect against attack, but they are far less successful at creating comfort. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval castles are designed first for defense and status, not for efficient heating. Even wealthy nobles often complain about cold rooms during winter. Large fireplaces, tapestries, shutters, and heavy curtains improve conditions, but much of the building remains chilly for long stretches of the year. You walk into the great hall. The central fireplace burns brightly. Long tables stand ready for meals. Colourful banners hang from wooden beams. Several enormous tapestries cover sections of the walls. They are beautiful works of art. They are also practical. Heavy woven cloth traps a layer of still air between itself and the cold stone. This reduces drafts and makes nearby spaces feel slightly warmer. The tapestry serves as insulation disguised as decoration. Near one fireplace sits a noblewoman holding a baby. The infant wears clothing much finer than anything found in a village cottage. Soft linen, beautifully woven wool, tiny embroidered sleeves, a carefully stitched cap. The fabrics are luxurious, but the basic strategy remains familiar. Layers, warmth, constant attention. The nurse gently checks the baby's hands before wrapping another light blanket around the child's legs. Money has purchased better cloth. It has not defeated winter. You continue through narrow stairways that twist upward inside thick towers. The walls feel cold beneath your fingertips. Arrow slits admit faint daylight but very little warmth. The castle's design favours defence over sunlight. During a siege, this makes excellent military sense. During January, it feels like living inside an elegant stone refrigerator. Fortunately, thus, noble families rarely spend all their time wandering chilly hallways. Private chambers become the true centre of family life. These rooms are much smaller than the Great Hall. They contain fireplaces, wooden furniture, beds surrounded by curtains, thick rugs cover parts of the floor. Animal skins lie across benches and chairs. Every effort is made to shrink the amount of space requiring warmth. You notice servants constantly carrying fuel. Keeping a castle heated requires astonishing quantities of firewood. Forests become valuable resources not only for building timber, but also for fuel. Entire teams work throughout the year cutting, transporting, drying, and storing wood for the coming winter. Even wealthy households cannot burn carelessly. One quirky detail catches your attention. Some castles use portable metal braziers filled with glowing charcoal. These can be moved from room to room, offering extra warmth where needed. They must be handled cautiously because charcoal produces dangerous fumes if ventilation is poor. Medieval people do not understand carbon monoxide, but they certainly notice that enclosed smoky rooms can make people ill. Servants open windows briefly to refresh stale air despite the cold. Fresh air and warmth exist in constant competition. The baby sleeps in a beautifully carved cradle decorated with painted flowers and small carved animals. It is far more elaborate than the simple village cradle, yet its position is almost identical, close enough to the fire for warmth, far enough away to avoid sparks. The logic remains exactly the same. You leave the castle and travel back toward a modest farming cottage. Its roof is lower, its windows are smaller, its rooms are fewer. At first glance it appears much poorer. Then you step inside. The warmth surprises you. The entire family lives in one main room. Cooking, eating, working, sleeping, everything happens within a compact space surrounding the hearth. Heat has much less room to escape. The air feels noticeably warmer than the vast castle hall despite the family's far smaller supply of firewood. You begin to understand an interesting truth. Size works against comfort during winter. A little house filled with people can sometimes feel warmer than a magnificent fortress filled with empty chambers. The baby in this cottage wears patched clothing rather than embroidered garments. The cradle is plain. The blankets are older. Yet the child sleeps peacefully beside a lively fire while voices fill the room. Historians still argue whether noble infants generally experienced healthier early childhoods than peasant children. Wealth brought better food, trained wet nurses, physicians, and high-quality clothing. At the same time, crowded castles, frequent travel, political upheaval, and outbreaks of disease created serious risks of their own. Survival depended upon many factors beyond social class alone. The contrast becomes clearer as evening approaches. In the castle, servants hurry through long corridors carrying candles that barely disturb the darkness. In the cottage, one fire lights nearly everything. In the castle, some rooms remain empty and freezing. In the cottage, every available corner contains life. Neither setting is perfect. Both demand constant effort. Both require thoughtful planning whenever a baby is present. As night falls, snow settles quietly across rooftops of every kind. It lands equally upon castle towers and humble cottages. Winter shows little interest in titles. Cold treats noble families and farmers with remarkable fairness. The difference lies in how each household answers the challenge. Some answer with tapestries, carved fireplaces, and teams of servants. Others answer with smaller rooms, shared labour, and careful use of every log. Each solution reflects the resources available. Each reveals generations of practical experience. And in both places, somewhere near a glowing fire, an infant sleeps beneath warm layers while adults keep watch through another long medieval night. The fire burns quietly while the baby sleeps. For a little while, nobody speaks above a whisper. One woman mends a sleeve, another slowly stirs a pot hanging above the hearth. Outside, winter presses against the stone walls with patient determination. Inside, another kind of protection quietly surrounds the child. Not every danger can be chased away with wool blankets or burning logs. Illness arrives without knocking. A cough begins as a tiny sound. A fever appears suddenly. A rash spreads before anyone understands why. The medieval family has no laboratory, no antibiotics, and no modern thermometer. Instead, they depend on experience, traditional remedies, prayer, and hope. The baby's mother gently places her hand across the infant's forehead. Not too warm, not too cold, just right. Her hand has become an instrument refined by daily practice. Long before scientific medicine develops, parents become skilled at recognizing subtle changes in a child's condition simply through careful observation. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval medicine draws heavily upon the writings of ancient authorities such as Hippocrates and Galen. Physicians believe that good health depends upon balancing the body's humours. While this theory does not accurately explain disease, it strongly influences medical treatment throughout much of medieval Europe. Most ordinary families, however, rarely summon a physician. Doctors are expensive. Villages may not have one nearby. Instead, knowledge often comes from older relatives, local healers, monasteries, midwives, and generations of practical household experience. You notice a small wooden shelf near the hearth. Bundles of dried herbs hang from pegs. Their scent fills the warm air. Chamomile, sage, thyme, mint, rosemary, some herb-seasoned meals. Others become teas or simple preparations used when someone feels unwell. The family carefully chooses plants they know well. Mistakes can be dangerous, so familiarity matters far more than experimentation. One elderly woman prepares warm water infused with chamomile. She does not give it to the baby. Instead, She drinks it herself while caring for the household. A calm caregiver is often a better caregiver. The baby continues sleeping peacefully beneath a soft-walled blanket. Nearby, another woman crushes fragrant herbs with a smooth stone. The pleasant smell spreads through the room. Whether the aroma truly drives away sickness is uncertain, but it certainly makes the smoky house feel fresher. One quirky custom soon catches your attention. A tiny pouch containing dried herbs hangs near the cradle. The family believes its fragrance may help protect the infant from unseen dangers. Other households might use a small carved cross, a polished stone, a blessed ribbon, or another meaningful object. These items offer reassurance as much as anything else. When life feels uncertain, people naturally seek comfort in symbols they trust. The baby's grandmother quietly makes the sign of the cross before lifting the child. Her movement is gentle and familiar. Prayer forms another layer of protection. Parents pray for safe births. They pray through illnesses. They pray during storms and difficult winters. Faith provides emotional strength during times when medicine can accomplish only so much. Church bells ring faintly across the snowy landscape. The sound reaches the house only as a distant echo. Even so, everyone pauses for a brief moment. The rhythm of religious life shapes the calendar as surely as the changing seasons. You notice that cleanliness receives more attention than popular stories often suggest. The baby is changed regularly. Fresh linen replaces damp cloth whenever possible. Hands are wiped before handling food. Wooden bowls are rinsed. Cooking pots are scrubbed with sand or ash. These habits are not based upon knowledge of bacteria. They simply make practical sense. A clean child tends to remain more comfortable. A clean kitchen smells better. Experience quietly teaches useful routines long before people understand the invisible reasons behind them. Historians still argue whether medieval hygiene has been unfairly portrayed in popular culture. Older descriptions often imagine people living in constant filth without concern for cleanliness. Archaeological discoveries, household records, and surviving writing suggest a more complicated picture. Standards differ widely according to wealth, region, season, and access to water, but many families clearly value washing, fresh clothing, and orderly homes. You step outside for a moment. Snowflakes drift gently through the still air. The cold bites immediately. When you return inside, the warmth feels welcoming despite the lingering smoke. The baby stirs. A tiny sneeze escapes. Every adult in the room looks over at once. The infant blinks, wiggles slightly, then falls asleep again. The collective sigh of relief almost becomes its own breeze. Apparently, babies have always possessed the remarkable ability to alarm every nearby grown-up with one perfectly ordinary sneeze. Near the doorway hangs a bundle of garlic. Its strongest purpose is probably culinary. Still, some people also believe it helps guard against illness or harmful influences. Whether it frightens away sickness is impossible to prove. It certainly frightens away anyone hoping for a polite first kiss. As daylight fades, someone lights a tallow candle. Its flame flickers softly beside the fire. The room becomes calmer. Voices grow quieter. The grandmother begins humming an old lullaby. Nobody seems to know exactly how old the song is. Perhaps her own grandmother sang it. Perhaps it has drifted through countless winters before this one. The baby relaxes almost immediately. The melody asks for nothing. It simply fills the room with gentle familiarity. You realize that protection takes many forms. Some come from practical knowledge, warm clothing, nutritious food, dry bedding, careful observation. Others come from belief, blessings, prayers, protective charms, songs sung in the dark. Each offers something different. Some strengthen the body, some steady the mind. Some comfort worried parents facing another uncertain winter. The fire glows lower as evening deepens. Someone quietly adds another log. The baby sleeps peacefully in the cradle while familiar voices continue their gentle conversation nearby. Beyond the thick stone walls, frost spreads silently across the fields. Within this modest room, care is measured not only by medicine, but also by kindness, patience, faith, and the countless small rituals that help a family greet another cold night with hope rather than fear. The house is quiet, not silent. A fire pops softly inside the hearth. A beam creaks somewhere overhead. Wind brushes against the shutters. The baby breathes with a slow rhythm of deep sleep while the adults remain only half asleep themselves. Winter nights demand constant attention because cold is only one of many dangers hiding in the darkness. You begin to notice that every corner of the room contains some small risk. The fire keeps everyone alive. The fire can also destroy everything. A single spark leaps from a burning log and lands on the packed earth floor. It dies almost immediately. Nobody ignores it. The father calmly nudges the log farther into the hearth with an iron poker. He has performed this little movement thousands of times. The baby's cradle never sits where a stray ember could easily reach it. Distance is carefully judged, close enough for warmth, far enough for safety. Everyone in the household knows exactly where that invisible line lies. A mainstream historical fact is that accidental fires are a constant concern throughout the Middle Ages. Houses built partly from timber, roofs covered with thatch, and open flames used for heating and cooking create a combination that demands continuous vigilance. Entire villages occasionally suffer devastating fires that spread rapidly from building to building. The family treats every flame with quiet respect. No one leaves the hearth unattended for long. Even children learn early that burning wood deserves careful handling. You glance toward the ceiling. Thin ribbons of smoke drift upward before disappearing through the chimney. Not all of the smoke leaves. Some lingers inside the room. Your eyes sting slightly. A smell settles into your clothing. Adults have grown accustomed to it after years of daily exposure. The baby has no such choice. Tiny lungs breathe the same smoky air hour after hour. Nobody realizes exactly how harmful long-term smoke exposure can be. Even so, families naturally try to improve the airflow whenever weather allows. Earlier in the day, a shutter may be opened briefly. A door may remain open for only a few moments while bringing in wood. Fresh air enters. Smoke slips away. Then the room is closed again before too much warmth escapes. Balancing warmth and ventilation becomes a daily challenge. Neither can be ignored. The floor presents another hazard. It is uneven in places. Buckets stand near the hearth. Wooden stools wait wherever someone last finished using them. A sleepy adult walking through the room during the middle of the night must remember every familiar obstacle. Fortunately, everyone knows the house almost by memory. You would probably trip over 3 things before reaching the cradle. The family would simply step around them without looking. The baby begins stirring. The mother wakes almost instantly. She does not leap from bed in panic. Instead, she listens first. The cry sounds ordinary, hungry, not frightened, not weak. She smiles softly. Experience has taught her that every cry carries its own meaning. Nearby, a mouse darts beneath a storage chest. Nobody appears especially surprised. Medieval houses often contain unwelcome little visitors searching for grain during winter. Food is stored carefully in chests, barrels, sacks, and hanging containers whenever possible. Cats earn their place in many households through tireless hunting. One sleek cat stretches lazily beside the fire before wandering off in search of another midnight patrol. The mouse, quite sensibly, decides this is an excellent moment to disappear. Moisture creates another invisible danger. Stone walls collect dampness during long periods of cold weather. Blankets accidentally left against wet surfaces become chilly. Clothing hung without enough warmth dries slowly. The family checks bedding regularly to make sure it stays dry. Even a little dampness can steal valuable body heat from an infant. One quirky belief appears as midnight approaches. Some families think that keeping an iron object near the cradle discourages harmful spirits wandering during the night. Perhaps it's a small knife tucked safely out of reach. Perhaps a simple iron nail rests beneath the cradle. Iron has long been associated in European folklore with protection against unseen forces. Whether invisible creatures truly dislike iron remains impossible to confirm. It certainly gives anxious parents one more reason to believe the child is safe. Outside, so wolves may roam distant forests. Their howls occasionally drift across snowy fields. They sound dramatic. In reality, wolves are usually a greater threat to livestock than to babies sleeping inside sturdy houses. The sound still encourages everyone to pull blankets a little closer. Your imagination often works harder after sunset. Historians still argue whether wild animals posed a significant danger to ordinary medieval villages during severe winters, or whether later stories exaggerated the risk. Contemporary accounts include frightening encounters, yet archaeological and historical evidence suggests that attacks on people remain relatively uncommon compared with disease, hunger, and accidents. The father quietly checks the wooden door before returning to bed. Its heavy beam remains firmly in place. Simple locks, wooden bars, and sturdy hinges provide reassurance against thieves or wandering strangers. Security matters. A peaceful night allows everyone to sleep more deeply. The baby has fallen asleep again after feeding. The mother gently places a hand beneath the blankets for a moment. Still warm, still comfortable. She adjusts the cap slightly. Nothing more is needed. Across the room, glowing embers settle into soft red light. The brightest flames have disappeared. The hearth now radiates steady warmth instead of lively heat. Someone rises once more to add another small log. Not a large one, just enough to carry the fire through the remaining hours before dawn. Every piece of wood has been earned through hard work. None is wasted. You begin to appreciate how survival depends upon dozens of quiet decisions rather than dramatic moments. The cradle is placed wisely. The blankets remain dry. The fire is watched. Food is protected. Smoke is managed as well as possible. Doors are secured. Everyone listens for unusual sounds. Each action seems ordinary. Together they create a careful web of protection surrounding the smallest member of the household. Beyond the stone walls, the frozen landscape stretches beneath a sky full of stars. Inside, the family sleeps lightly, always ready to wake if needed. The dangers of the night never fully disappear, neither does the patient care that keeps meeting them. One calm decision at a time. The snow beneath your feet changes as you travel. In one place it is deep enough to swallow your boots. A few hundred miles away it becomes little more than a light dusting. Farther south, winter rain replaces snow altogether. The baby sleeping beneath a wool blanket experiences very different winters, depending on where in medieval Europe the family calls home. Cold is never exactly the same. You begin your journey in the far north. The days are short. Sunlight seems reluctant to appear. Forests stretch across the landscape, providing timber for houses, firewood for hearths, and shelter from harsh winds. Winters can last for many months, forcing families to prepare enormous stores of food and fuel long before the first snowfall. Homes here often rely heavily on wood as well as stone. Timber walls provide better insulation than bare stone alone. Moss, clay, or packed earth may fill small gaps between logs, helping keep icy air outside where it belongs. The baby wears thicker wool clothing than a child born in milder regions. Extra blankets appear at night. The fire rarely goes out completely during winter. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval architecture varies greatly across Europe because builders use materials that are locally available. Stone dominates in many rocky regions, while forests encourage timber construction. Climate shapes building techniques just as strongly as wealth or fashion. You continue toward the mountains. Villages cling to steep hillsides. Roofs become sharply angled so heavy snow slides away before its weight damages the building. Inside these homes, sleeping areas are often tucked beneath the roof where rising heat gathers naturally. The climb upstairs leaves you slightly out of breath. The baby, however, enjoys a sleeping space that stays a little warmer simply because warm air rises. Nature quietly lends a hand. Farther west, powerful winds sweep in from the ocean. Salt hangs faintly in the air. Storms arrive with remarkable speed. Families pay close attention to roof repairs because a small leak during winter can soak bedding, clothing, and precious stores of grain. A damp house becomes a cold house. The baby's blankets receive extra care after every storm. Nothing is folded away until completely dry. Even the finest wool cannot perform its best if neglected. You travel south into lands where olive trees grow. Winter still arrives, but it carries a gentler touch. Snow is less common. Rain falls more often. Stone houses remain cool for much of the year, which is welcome during hot summers but can feel surprisingly chilly during damp winters. The family still gathers around the hearth. The baby still wears layered clothing. The difference lies mostly in degree rather than method. The fire burns fewer hours. Blankets are lighter. Doors may stand open longer during daylight. Life adjusts to the local climate without changing its basic priorities. One village surprises you with brightly painted wooden shutters. During sunny afternoons, they are opened wide to welcome light and warmth. As evening approaches, they close tightly against cooling air. Simple habits make a noticeable difference. The smallest improvement is worth repeating every day. You stop at a busy market town where merchants have arrived from many different regions. Their wagons carry wool, linen, salt, dried fish, spices, iron tools, and colourful cloth. Conversations fill the square in several languages. As families exchange goods, they also exchange ideas. Someone describes a better way to weave thicker blankets. Another demonstrates a new style of baby cap from a distant valley. Useful knowledge travels surprisingly well. One quirky custom catches your attention in a mountain village. Families carve tiny protective symbols into the wooden beams above doors and cradles. Some designs resemble simple crosses. Others are geometric patterns passed down through generations. The exact meaning sometimes fades with time, yet people continue carving them because their grandparents always did. Tradition often survives long after its original explanation has been forgotten. You continue eastward. Winters become colder again. The wind sweeps across broad plains with very little to slow it. Trees are fewer. Firewood becomes especially valuable. Families carefully ration every log. Dung gathered from livestock may also be dried and burned as fuel where wood is scarce. The smell is not particularly luxurious, but it produces welcome heat during difficult seasons. You decide not to complain. Warmth is warmth. The baby certainly does not care what fuel created it. Historians still argue whether the medieval warm period noticeably improved everyday life across all parts of Europe, or whether its effects varied significantly from region to region. Evidence from tree rings, ice cores, written harvest records, and archaeological studies suggest that climate changed unevenly, with some areas experiencing milder conditions while others remained vulnerable to severe winters. The journey continues through farming villages where houses cluster close together. This arrangement offers more than companionship. Buildings shelter one another from strong winds. Narrow streets reduce exposure. Neighbours remain only a few steps away if help becomes necessary. A baby's cry might easily be heard next door during a quiet evening. Community itself becomes part of survival. You notice familiar patterns wherever you travel. The cradle remains near warmth. The baby's head stays covered. Dry bedding receives careful attention. Adults check the child's breathing and comfort many times throughout the day. The details change. The principles do not. Climate influences solutions. It does not erase common sense. As darkness settles over another unfamiliar village, smoke rises gently from dozens of chimneys into the cold evening sky. Every house contains its own version of winter. Some rooms are larger. Some fires burn hotter, some blankets are finer, some walls are thicker, yet inside each home, someone quietly pulls another layer over a sleeping infant, adjusts a tiny cap, and listens for the peaceful rhythm of gentle breathing. Across mountains, forests, islands, valleys, and open plains, countless families face the same challenge in their own way. The weather speaks with many different voices. Care answers in every language. The winter night slowly gives way to a pale grey morning. The medieval family begins another ordinary day without realizing that centuries later, people will search for traces of their lives buried beneath fields, hidden inside ruined houses, and preserved in forgotten corners of old churches. You leave the warmth of the house and step forward through time. The voices fade. The smoke disappears. In their place comes the careful scrape of an archaeologist's trowel against the earth. A trench has been opened beside the remains of a stone cottage. Nothing looks impressive at first. There are no glittering crowns, no jewelled swords, no dramatic treasure chest waiting beneath the soil. Instead, someone becomes excited over a broken piece of pottery no larger than your palm. You quickly learn that history is wonderfully patient. Small objects often tell the bigger stories. A mainstream historical fact is that archaeologists reconstruct everyday medieval life by combining physical discoveries with written records, surviving buildings, artwork, and scientific analysis. No single source provides every answer. Each contributes one small piece to a much larger puzzle. A fragment of pottery reveals what people cooked. Animal bones show what families ate. Charred seeds identify crops grown nearby. Pieces of cloth reveal weaving techniques. Together they slowly rebuild a world that disappeared hundreds of years ago. You watch a researcher carefully brush soil from a tiny bronze pin. It once fastened clothing. Perhaps it held together a baby's cap. Perhaps it belonged to an older sister. Nobody can say for certain. Even so, the object reminds you that ordinary life leaves quiet footprints. Nearby, another team studies the remains of an ancient fireplace. The stones are blackened with soot. Ash still survives in protected layers beneath collapsed walls. Scientists examine the charcoal left behind to identify which kinds of wood were burned. Oak, ash, hazel, birch. Different species reveal which trees grew nearby and how families managed their precious fuel supplies. The fireplace itself becomes evidence. Its size, its position, its construction. Each detail helps explain how heat spread through the room during winter. You notice that the doorway faces away from the strongest prevailing wind. This was no accident. Builders learned through generations of experience which direction offered the greatest protection. Practical knowledge quietly became architecture. A small excavation nearby uncovers part of a wooden cradle. Most of it has long since decayed. Only waterlogged fragments survive because unusual soil conditions protected them from complete destruction. The curved runner is still visible. The wood bears tiny marks left by careful carving tools. The cradle is plain, functional, made to be used rather than admired, yet seeing it produces an unexpected feeling. Someone once stood over this cradle on a freezing night. Someone gently rocked it while listening to the wind outside. The child who slept there has vanished into history. The cradle remains. Researchers also study old textile fragments recovered from wells, graves, and damp ground where cloth survives unusually well. Even tiny fibres reveal remarkable information. Microscopes identify whether threads came from flax, sheep, or other materials. Scientists count the number of woven threads. They examine dyes. They even determine how tightly cloth was spun. A scrap no larger than your thumb suddenly becomes evidence of medieval craftsmanship. One quirky discovery makes everyone smile. Occasionally archaeologists find tiny footprints baked into old floor tiles or bricks. A child may have stepped across wet clay before it hardened. Sometimes even the paw print of a curious cat appears beside them. Nobody planned to leave these marks. They simply happened on an ordinary day. Hundreds of years later, those accidental footprints become delightful reminders that children and animals have always possessed excellent timing when walking across freshly made things. You wander into a museum where carefully preserved objects fill quiet display cases. There is a small wool cap, a carved wooden spoon, a simple leather shoe scarcely longer than your hand. Each item belonged to someone whose name has long been forgotten. Visitors speak softly. Perhaps they sense that these humble possessions deserve just as much respect as royal crowns. Historians still argue whether surviving archaeological evidence fairly represents everyday medieval life. Wealthier families often leave behind more durable buildings, written documents, and valuable objects. Poorer households, built with simpler materials, sometimes disappear almost completely. Archaeologists must constantly consider what has survived by chance and what has been permanently lost. Another researcher studies the bones of infants buried many centuries ago. The work is carried out with great care and respect. The bones reveal age, growth, signs of illness, and occasionally evidence of nutritional stress. They cannot tell every story. They never reveal a child's laughter. They cannot preserve a lullaby. Yet they quietly help historians understand how children lived, grew, and sometimes struggled. Technology continues adding new pieces to the puzzle. Tree rings reveal years of drought or abundant rainfall. Ancient pollen trapped beneath the soil identifies long-vanished forests. Chemical analysis shows where some people spent their childhoods by examining tiny traces preserved inside their teeth. History becomes a conversation between many different sciences. You realize something remarkable. The medieval family never expected anyone to remember their ordinary routines. They simply lived them. They gathered firewood. They mended clothing. They rocked a cradle. They checked a sleeping baby's forehead before returning to work. Those simple acts rarely appeared in official records. Kings signed treaties. Armies marched. Castles changed hands. Meanwhile, Countless unnamed families quietly raised children through another cold winter. Their stories survived because tiny clues remained scattered across the landscape. A worn hearth, a broken spindle, a patched blanket preserved by chance, a cradle runner resting beneath layers of earth. The evidence is incomplete. Some questions will never receive perfect answers. Even so, each discovery brings you a little closer to understanding the patient skill, careful planning, and everyday affection that helped medieval babies endure long freezing nights inside homes built from unforgiving stone. You arrive in a room filled with modern books, paintings, films, and television dramas. According to many of them, medieval parents appear permanently dirty, permanently miserable, and somehow too busy surviving to care very much about their children. It is a familiar picture. It is also a picture that deserves a second look. History often becomes simpler than it really was. A cold stone house easily turns into a symbol for endless suffering. A smoky hearth becomes proof that life was nothing but hardship. A baby's survival is treated as a lucky accident rather than the result of careful daily effort. The reality is far more interesting. You step into another ordinary medieval home. A father carefully trims a splinter from a wooden toy. A mother hums while folding freshly dried linen. An older sister laughs as the baby discovers the astonishing power of grabbing someone's hair at exactly the wrong moment. Apparently, tiny hands have been conducting surprise attacks since the beginning of civilization. A mainstream historical fact is that surviving letters, household accounts, religious writings, and artwork all show parents mourning the deaths of children and celebrating their births. Medieval families frequently named children after beloved relatives, commissioned memorials, and recorded losses with deep emotion. These sources suggest affection was an important part of family life, despite the harsh realities of the age. One of the oldest myths claims that parents remained emotionally distant because infant mortality was high. The idea sounds logical at first. If many children died, perhaps families avoided becoming attached. Yet the evidence rarely supports such a simple conclusion. You watch the mother gently straighten the baby's cap. The father pauses his work simply to smile at a sleepy yawn. The grandmother quietly rocks the cradle even though nobody asked her to. These small actions speak more clearly than dramatic theories. People usually do not spend this much time protecting someone they do not love. High infant mortality does not eliminate affection. If anything, it may deepen the determination to protect every child who has entered the household. Another common myth insists medieval people knew almost nothing about childcare. Certainly they lacked modern medicine. They did not understand viruses. They could not explain bacteria. Yet ignorance of scientific causes does not mean ignorance of practical care. Generations observed what seemed to help. Warm clothing, frequent feeding, dry bedding, fresh air when possible, constant supervision. These habits developed through long experience rather than laboratory experiments. The family might not explain why a clean blanket mattered. They still replaced a damp one. You notice another misunderstanding. Modern stories often imagine every medieval house as a freezing stone castle. In reality, many people lived in timber houses, mixed wood and stone buildings, or simple cottages built from local materials. Even among stone houses, designs varied enormously according to geography, wealth, and available resources. There was no single medieval home, only many different homes sharing certain practical ideas. One quirky misconception has become especially popular. Some people confidently claim medieval babies were left hanging on walls in their swaddling clothes like decorative winter coats. The truth is far less dramatic. Historical sources describe swaddling, and some artwork shows infants secured safely while caregivers work nearby. These images have sometimes inspired exaggerated stories suggesting babies spent endless hours dangling from hooks. Evidence for such widespread practice remains remarkably thin. Most surviving descriptions emphasize carrying, feeding, rocking, and watching infants rather than storing them like kitchen utensils. The baby currently stretching inside the cradle seems very pleased that historians eventually questioned that rumour. Historians still argue whether certain medieval illustrations should be understood as literal scenes from everyday life or symbolic artistic conventions. Medieval artists often valued religious meaning, visual clarity, and tradition over strict realism, making every painted detail worth careful interpretation. You wander into a monastery where monks carefully copy manuscripts by candlelight. Among religious texts, medical advice, and calendars, there are occasional references to childbirth, nursing, and caring for young children. The language sometimes feels unfamiliar. The concern does not. Advice encourages patience, moderation, thoughtful observation, careful feeding. These recommendations sound surprisingly recognizable, despite the centuries separating your world from theirs. Children also appear in medieval art far more often than many people expect. Stone carvings, illuminated manuscripts, painted church walls, family portraits, religious scenes. Artists include babies wrapped in blankets, held in loving arms, or sleeping peacefully beside attentive adults. Not every image reflects everyday reality with photographic accuracy. Together they reveal that infancy occupies an important place within medieval imagination. Outside, winter continues across the countryside. Inside, life goes on with remarkable normality. Someone kneads bread. Someone repairs harness straps. Someone checks the fire. Someone wipes milk from the baby's chin before it has the opportunity to become tomorrow's fashion statement. Another myth quietly fades away. The Middle Ages were not a single 1,000-year block in which nothing changed. Clothing evolved. Buildings improved. Fireplaces became more efficient. Trade expanded. Agriculture adapted. Ideas travelled. Communities learned from experience. A family living in the 11th century did not necessarily organise daily life exactly like one living 400 years later. The medieval world constantly changed, even if those changes sometimes happened slowly. You notice the ordinary rhythm surrounding the baby. There is laughter. There is work. There is worry. There is relief. There is exhaustion. There is quiet happiness when the infant finally falls asleep after insisting for an hour that sleep is an entirely unreasonable suggestion. Some parts of parenthood appear astonishingly resistant to the passage of time. The greatest lesson is perhaps the simplest. People living inside cold stone houses were not strange creatures from another universe. They loved warmth because they disliked freezing. They treasured healthy children because they understood how fragile life could be. They celebrated small victories. A peaceful night's sleep, a strong appetite, a fever that disappeared, a baby waking with bright eyes on another winter morning. The centuries between you may seem enormous, yet as you watch one parent gently pull a blanket over a sleeping child, the distance quietly begins to disappear. Love leaves very few archaeological traces. It rarely survives inside broken pottery or weathered stone. Even so, it reveals itself through thousands of ordinary actions repeated day after day. Those quiet moments tell a story every bit as real as castle, kings, and famous battles. Night returns with quiet confidence. The last grey light disappears behind the hills, and the cold immediately becomes sharper. Frost gathers along the edges of the shutters. The stone walls slowly surrender the little warmth they borrowed during the day. This time, you remain awake. You watch every hour pass inside the house. The family is settled into a familiar rhythm that has been repeated through countless winters. The baby is asleep. For now, the fire glows orange rather than yellow. Bright flames are no longer needed. A steady bed of embers produces reliable heat without consuming unnecessary wood. Every log placed on the hearth has been carried from the forest, chopped, dried, and stored months before. Nobody feeds the fire carelessly. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval households carefully managed fuel supplies throughout winter because gathering enough firewood required enormous effort. Running short before spring could place an entire family in serious danger, so fires were tended with remarkable attention. The father places another small log across the embers. Not too large, not too small. He watches until it catches, then returns to his place beside the bed. The room grows quiet again. Only the gentle crackling of burning wood interrupts the silence. An hour passes. The baby begins making soft little noises while still asleep. The mother hears them immediately. She does not rush over. She waits. The sounds stop. The child settles comfortably beneath the blankets. Experience has taught her that not every movement requires intervention. Sometimes babies simply dream. You smile at the thought. Perhaps medieval babies also dreamed about things they cannot yet understand. Maybe warm milk, maybe flickering firelight, maybe the mysterious wooden spoon that adults refuse to let them chew. The mystery remains unsolved. Outside, snow begins falling again. Each flake lands so softly that the world seems wrapped in wool. The wind fades. Without its constant pressure against the walls, the room suddenly feels calmer. Cold weather has many personalities. Tonight it chooses stillness. Another hour slips quietly past. The grandmother wakes naturally. She rises without making unnecessary noise. Her knees protest every movement with quiet determination. But she ignores them. She walks to the hearth. Using the poker, she gently rearranges glowing coals. A shower of tiny sparks rises for only a moment before disappearing. She adds one carefully chosen piece of wood. Then she stands with her hands extended toward the warmth. Not because she needs luxury, because old hands grow cold more easily. Before returning to bed, she pauses beside the cradle. One finger lightly touches the baby's cheek. Warm, comfortable. She smiles to herself. No words are needed. The room settles once more. Far away, a church bell marks another hour. Its sound drifts across sleeping fields. Most people never count how many times they wake during a winter night. Instead, they simply respond whenever the house asks something of them. A log needs adjusting. A blanket slips sideways. Someone coughs. A child murmurs in sleep. Life continues quietly even in darkness. The baby wakes again. This time there is no doubt. A determined cry quickly fills the room. The mother is already sitting upright before the second cry arrives. She wraps herself in a thick cloak and lifts the child from the cradle. The blanket stays around both of them, trapping warmth between their bodies. Feeding begins. The baby calms almost immediately. The father remains awake for a few minutes longer, watching the fire while mother and child rest together. Neither parent speaks. There is nothing that needs saying. This routine belongs to every winter night. One quirky belief appears while the baby feeds. A small sprig of evergreen hangs above the doorway throughout the cold season. Some families believe evergreen plants symbolize enduring life because they remain green when everything else is withered. Whether the little branch truly influences fortune is impossible to know, but its fresh scent brings a pleasant reminder that spring still exists somewhere beyond the frozen fields. The feeding finishes. The mother gently burps the baby. A surprisingly loud little sound echoes through the room. The grandmother opens one eye. The father smiles without saying a word. The baby appears extremely satisfied with this achievement. Peace returns. Historians still argue whether medieval families generally slept longer during winter, because nights were extended, or whether repeated interruptions of attending fires, feeding infants, and caring for livestock meant total sleep was often broken into several shorter periods. The answer probably differed from one household to another, depending on occupation, climate, and family size. Another hour passes. The embers glow steadily. The room grows slightly cooler. Blankets become more valuable with every passing minute. You notice how carefully they're arranged. Edges are tucked beneath sleeping bodies. Small openings where warm air might escape are quietly closed. Nobody explains the physics. Nobody needs to. Generations have already discovered what works. The baby sighs softly in sleep. Tiny fingers loosen from their little fist. The cap remains securely in place. A blanket is shifted only slightly. The mother reaches over without fully waking and pulls it back into position. The movement lasts only 2 seconds. It may be the most important action of the entire night. Outside, the stars slowly fade. The eastern horizon becomes a shade lighter than the rest of the sky. Morning approaches almost unnoticed. The cold reaches its deepest point just before sunrise. The fire burns lower. The last carefully chosen log begins turning into glowing charcoal. Someone will soon rise to prepare breakfast. Someone will carry fresh water. Someone will open the shutters to admit the pale winter light. For now, everyone remains still. The baby has survived another freezing night not because of one miraculous invention or one heroic act, but because dozens of ordinary decisions have quietly protected every hour. A carefully tended fire, dry blankets, warm clothing, patient feeding, listening ears, watchful hands, shared warmth, steady experience. The house itself is built from cold stone. The family transforms it into a place where new life can continue through the hardest season. Outside, the first birds begin their cautious morning songs. Inside, the baby sleeps peacefully, completely unaware of the remarkable teamwork that has carried one more winter night safely into dawn. The first pale light of dawn slips through the narrow shutters. It arrives quietly. No trumpet announces the morning. No dramatic beam of sunshine suddenly fills the room. Instead, the darkness simply begins to loosen its grip. Shadows soften. The outlines of chairs, benches, and hanging pots slowly return. The fire has become a bed of glowing embers waiting for the day's first careful log. The baby's still asleep. That tiny fact feels like a victory. The family wakes one by one, not because an alarm rings, but because winter work cannot wait. The father stretches stiff muscles before kneeling beside the hearth. He brushes ash aside, uncovers the hottest coals, and places dry kindling across them. Within minutes, small flames appear. Another day has begun. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval households followed the rhythm of daylight throughout much of the year. Winter mornings began later than summer ones, yet families still made full use of every hour of natural light for cooking, repairing tools, tending animals, spinning cloth, and preparing food. The mother looks first toward the cradle. Only after seeing the baby sleeping peacefully does she begin her own morning tasks. The grandmother opens the shutters just enough to admit grey daylight while keeping most of the cold outside. Fresh air slips into the room for a brief moment before the shutters are mostly closed again. The balance between warmth and clean air continues with every sunrise. Breakfast begins to take shape. Water warms above the fire. Bread is sliced. Porridge slowly thickens inside a blackened pot. The comforting smell spreads through the house. The baby wakes with a quiet stretch instead of a loud cry. Apparently, even medieval infants occasionally decide to be generous. The entire household silently appreciates this unexpected gift. The mother lifts the child and smiles as bright eyes blink at the morning light. Tiny hands immediately reach toward the nearest interesting object, which happens to be the father's beard. He accepts this with remarkable patience. Perhaps he has learned that arguing with a baby is usually a losing strategy. Outside, the village slowly comes alive. Smoke rises from neighbouring chimneys. Doors open! Footsteps crunch across frozen ground. Someone leads a cow toward fresh water. Another person carries an armful of firewood. The sounds are ordinary. Together, they create the familiar music of another winter day. You notice that the baby is once again wrapped carefully before anyone becomes busy with work. Nothing has changed overnight. Warm linen, soft wool, a snug cap, dry blankets, a cradle placed near the safest source of heat. These routines repeat because they succeed. They are not exciting. They are dependable. One quirky tradition appears as the family welcomes the morning. The grandmother quietly whispers a short blessing over the baby before beginning her chores. She does it almost absent-mindedly, as naturally as tying an apron or stirring the porridge. Whether spoken from deep faith, family custom, or simple affection, the words become another gentle thread woven into the child's daily life. The blessing lasts only a few seconds. Its comfort lasts much longer. Historians still argue whether the remarkable survival of many medieval children depended more upon household knowledge passed through generations or upon gradual improvements in housing, agriculture, and regional prosperity during different periods of the Middle Ages. The evidence suggests both mattered. Better harvests, stronger communities, practical experience, and attentive families all played important roles. You take one final look around the room. The stone walls remain cold. They have never changed. The winter outside remains unforgiving. That has not changed either. What truly makes the difference is everything placed between the baby and the cold. The fire, the blankets, the clothing, the cradle, the shared bed nearby, the careful feeding, the repaired roof, the stored firewood, the experienced hands that never stop checking, adjusting, listening, and watching. You arrived expecting to discover a single clever medieval secret. Instead, you found something much more believable. There was no magical blanket, no extraordinary invention, no forgotten heating system far ahead of its time. The answer was hundreds of ordinary choices working together. One family gathered enough wood during autumn. Another grandmother repaired one more blanket. One father closed another draft beneath the door. One mother woke once again to feed a hungry child. Each action seemed small. Together they became survival. That quiet teamwork carried generations of children through winters that would challenge even many modern households if electricity suddenly disappeared. The baby yawns one last time. Warm sunlight finally touches the edge of the cradle. The house is still simple. The furniture remains worn. The smoke still curls gently upward from the hearth. Yet the room feels rich in the things that matter most. Knowledge earned through experience. Patience practiced every day. Work shared without complaint. Love shown through ordinary habits rather than grand speeches. You step outside into the crisp morning air. Behind you, so smoke rises steadily from the chimney. Inside that modest stone house, another winter day has already begun, and another child has greeted the sunrise. For countless medieval families, that sunrise was never taken for granted. It was quietly celebrated simply by carrying on. They mended, cooked, gathered, fed, protected, and in doing so, they helped the smallest lives among them endure season after season, one careful day and one careful night at a time. Word count 1035. The morning grows gentler now. The air no longer feels quite so sharp. The smoke drifts upward in slow, graceful ribbons until it disappears into the brightening sky. The sound of the fire becomes softer, blending with distant birds and quiet footsteps across the frozen ground. The little stone house stands where it has always stood. Its walls are still cold. Its roof still carries traces of frost. Yet inside, warmth continues to gather wherever people choose to share it. The cradle rests peacefully near the hearth. Blankets lie folded with care. The day's work has begun without hurry. There is comfort in these familiar rhythms. You leave the family to their ordinary morning, knowing they will continue meeting each winter's day with the same patience that carried them through the night. The fields wait beneath a pale sky. The trees stand perfectly still. A light breeze brushes across the snow, leaving only the faintest whisper behind. Everything feels slower now, quieter, more peaceful. As you walk away, the sounds of the house gradually fade. The voices become distant. The crackling fire becomes only a memory. The little cradle remains safe within sturdy walls, watched over by kind hands and steady hearts. A long winter seems less frightening when shared. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson carried through these old stones. Warmth is rarely created by one great act. More often it grows from many small ones, repeated with care until they become a way of life. May the fire burn gently. May the blanket stay warm. May the morning light continue to find its way through every window, no matter how narrow. And may your own thoughts become as calm as drifting snow settling softly across a quiet medieval village. The journey grows still. The house fades into the distance. Only warmth, quiet, and peaceful winter light remain.